Profiles in Cinemania, Wilhelm von Homburg. You might not immediately put a face to the name Wilhelm von Homburg, but you'd know him if you saw his picture hanging on a wall, perhaps staring malevolently out of the canvas in an unsettling, aristocratic sneer. Let me refresh your memory. Vigo, Scourge of Carpathia, Sorrow of Moldova, Vigo the Carpathian, Vigo the Cruel, Vigo the Despised, Vigo the Unholy. The villain of Ghostbusters 2 barely had anything to do except be an especially evil painting with all the action and excitement that implies, and yet Vigo became something of an icon to the kids of the 80s and beyond. Interestingly, the man who played the painting was possibly more evil than the fictional man in the painting. Wilhelm von Homburg was born in 1940 under the somewhat more mundane name of Norbert Group. He was the son of a boxer and Nazi who worked as a concentration camp guard. He also had a sister who would later be the subject of dark rumors that she was actually his biological daughter, but a paternity test later proved this not to be the case. As a young man, he made a wrestling duo with his dad. They would dress in campy horned helmets and wrestle as a team called the Vikings. But soon he moved into professional boxing, beginning a lifetime's passion for finding ways to get into violent confrontations whenever possible. He fought all over America and Germany as a light heavyweight in the 60s, and back then he was known as a volatile and dangerous fighter, and a good one too. He changed his name to the more dangerous-sounding Wilhelm von Homburg for his boxing career, and it stuck with him through his life. Boxing wasn't to be a lifelong interest, though. See, Wilhelm had taken to hanging out with a bad crowd. He lived in Hamburg's red light district and worked with prostitutes and drug dealers, and was even associated with the Hells Angels. He ended up in prison after trying to deal drugs to an undercover officer, and after he got out, Wilhelm apparently wanted a new direction. Having developed a violent temper, a slurred speech impediment from one too many hits to the face, and no particular skill at acting, Wilhelm decided that he belonged on the silver screen. I guess no one wanted to tell him otherwise. He got some bit parts, and his list of credits is worth a look. He had parts in The Wrecking Crew, the last film Sharon Tate would play in before the Manson murders, and featured behind-the-scenes work of Bruce Lee and an early appearance from Chuck Norris. Then his first major role was in a Werner Herzog film playing a violent pimp. Herzog really knew how to pick him. As the 80s rolled in, he had another bit part in a little movie you may have heard of called Die Hard, as one of the angry, violent Germans. Always play to your strengths, Wilhelm. Of course, his biggest role was in Ghostbusters 2, and as mentioned, he is a completely flat, still image for most of it, which ironically played well to his acting strengths. Film roles seemed to dry up somewhat after that, possibly because he was simply not a very good actor, and more likely because everyone who worked with him noticed that he was angry, hateful, and vile. He seemed to be most unpleasant to the people who were closest to him, constantly borrowing money from friends and staying as a less than welcome house guest. How do you ask Vigo the Carpathian to get the hell off your couch and get a job? Well, in the 80s, several unfortunates got to answer that question. Never one to leave a bridge unburned, he criticized his sister for going to their father's deathbed to be by the dying man's side, calling him an asshole. The exact reason for all of this antipathy is enigmatic. Nonetheless, there was some real old-school biblical wrath there. When, in the early 2000s, he realized that his own end was coming due to advanced prostate cancer, von Homburg deliberately sequestered himself away at the home of perhaps his last remaining friend in Mexico, and ordered the man to not inform his sister of his passing until a month after his death, just so that she couldn't come see him one last time. This is a man who weaponized his own cancer to bring just a little more misery and bitterness into the life of his closest relatives out of spite. Somehow, he managed to be the black sheep of a family with an actual Nazi in it. Vigo the Despised, indeed. This has been another Profile in Cinemania. This episode was written and performed by Andy Slack, sound design and editing by Ethan Ireland, music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Profiles in Cinemania is a product of the Cinemania Society, LLC.